Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I'm Joe Rockey here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, first thing I want to do before we start today is thank the audience in that March was our largest viewed, listened to month ever. So I'd like to thank you all for doing that and helping spread the word and grow. It has only been done through you. And we're recording this, obviously releasing this after Easter. But I would like to go back to maybe the journey of the apostles and what they would have been going through, because across the passion that we just experienced, there were a lot of thoughts I had going through it. In the fact that these 12 men all had very different starting points. Some were fishermen, some were tax collectors. They were all different rings of society. And through their experiences with Jesus, they saw so many things that their historical training, upbringing for their job would never have prepared them for. They saw a man walk on water. They saw him command the supernatural demons that, the most part, people try to avoid demons, let alone actively going out and looking for them. They saw him feed more people than they've ever imagined, and there be leftovers. They saw all of these different interactions and kindnesses and teachings that he did. They themselves were questioned and answered. We believe he's the Messiah. He's doing everything, then treating people well, and all of this stuff that they couldn't ever fathom that they thought they would have gotten to see. And yet, in that moment of after Jesus is taken away, yes, Peter reacts and tries to cut off the ear, gets shamed essentially when Jesus re-heals the ear. But with all of that buildup and knowing everything in which Jesus was, they succumbed to fear. And from an outside perspective, an argument can be made is they lost faith in the mission when they all scattered. And I want to really kind of talk about that, because there's times in our lives when all of us are going to have believed in something and not reacted in the way that an outside judgment person thinks that we should. And there can be all kinds of stuff that happens after that. Guilt, questioning, why did I do that, etc. And using the apostles as the backdrop, but knowing that this happens to all of us, is the direction that I wanted to take today's conversation.
Yeah, I think we can approach that for a deeper understanding from a couple of perspectives, in terms of the way that our interior, one of the psychological models I really appreciate is just recognizing we have different parts. There are different subpersonalities. There are different parts of us, different kind of faces of us, you might say, or aspects of us that emerge in different circumstances. And we can feel very courageous one moment and very fearful the next. We can have a lot of confidence and then kind of crumble when a stronger force comes forward. And it's no joke what was happening. I mean, the entire structure of religious authority was seeking the full power of the Roman Empire to destroy Jesus. Like, that's no small thing. I mean, imagine an army rolls up to your front door. However confident you might have felt 10 minutes before that, you're not going to feel real confident when you have that kind of heat bearing down on you with absolutely no warning. It's not like the apostles, not absolutely. I mean, there were tensions were growing, but it's reasonable, I think, to imagine that the apostles had some confidence. I mean, this guy like healed the sick, cast out demons, and raised the dead. If an army rolls up to the door, he's going to like lift his hand and blow them back 100 yards. They weren't watching James Bond movies, but anyway, the imagination that Jesus is some kind of James Bond or Jason Bourne or Bruce Lee or whatever else. It's like he generated the confidence in them that he was God in their midst, and so the temptation to fashion that into, well, he'll be whatever we want him to be or need him to be at a particular moment, and the idea that that would include some dimension of physical power. I think that's not unreasonable to imagine. I don't know that they thought through it that much, but like suddenly when he's arrested, Peter may have only had the courage to draw his sword because he thought Jesus would also fight. I don't know. And then it's like, whoa, what? What just happened? He's just going to let himself be arrested? Like what's going on? And they just didn't comprehend, and we still don't comprehend. Like, let's be real honest. We still don't comprehend that weakness can be victorious, that littleness can be the height of greatness, that God can take the form of a baby and not just play act, but really be that. Like, we still don't understand. We're still trying to live this thing out. We still want to pose Christian dynamics, but then, well, just in case, let's build up all the human dynamics. Yeah, show up like a lamb, but have your lawyer in the background on speed dial. It's like we still want to play in this sandbox, which is half human and half divine. And so, yeah, I think it's pretty understandable that they didn't even have the benefit of seeing this whole thing play out once. I mean, to the degree that we have belief, we certainly have the account and then 2,000 years of witnesses that, in fact, if you take the path of surrender and crucifixion, it leads to resurrection. Like, it's still a pretty hard pill to swallow. And we have a whole lot more to base that on than the apostles did. They didn't even have the resurrection to base that on. They never saw it play out once. And so the idea that they crumbled when all that happened, I don't find that surprising at all, really. And yeah, and it's so important because how does Jesus respond to that? You know, Maybe he was corrective. I'm hesitant even to say shaming. That only carries negative connotations for me, I guess. But he wanted to use that instructive moment for Peter and for the rest of us to say, he who lives by the sword will die by the sword. If you're going to play by human dynamics, you're going to go down by human dynamics. Trust me, you got to let this play out. And then he warned Peter, and maybe so that when it happened, not to say like, you can't even manage the cock crow, you can't even manage the second watch of the night before you're going to deny him, not in a dismissive and accusatory way, but so that when Peter heard it, he could put together the fact that Jesus really knew Peter would deny him in the very same moment that Jesus is giving him everything in his body and blood, and even washing his feet. That the love that Jesus showed Peter had no hint of confusion or false expectation or denial in it. Jesus knew exactly who he was loving with all of the weaknesses that Peter had. And he loved him in that moment. And he never stopped loving him. So that when Peter actually carried out what surely for Peter was the worst thing he ever did in his life, he knew 100%. Jesus already knew this, and he already loved me. He didn't tell me, try real hard and maybe you won't deny him before the cock crows twice. He said, you will do this, Peter. And he said that in the context of, take this and eat of it. This is my body. So for Jesus to know the apostles would deny him and would flee, for him to know the outcome of this and still enter into it and still love them up front. Well, even the very fact of the Last Supper, that there was nothing in this which was like, oh gosh, this wasn't supposed to play out this way. Geez, I didn't know that they were going to bring the Roman guards. I forgot to figure out my legal defense before I entered into this thing. No, Jesus knew exactly what was unfolding. And he said yes to this. He said, I lay down my life. Here it is, my body. Here it is, my blood. I do this already. I choose this for you, and I will raise myself up back again as well. And I will do this for you and with you, insofar as you let me into all of those defeated, weak, poor, broken, bruised, and dying places in yourself. I will do this in you, with you, for you, and we will have this victory. So anyway, I think, Jesus, Jesus knew the weakness of men who are the same kind of men as we are. And that's what makes them also our, I heard one explanation for Thomas, who is called the twin, Didymus. And it's an odd line, but like whose twin? He's your twin and he's my twin. He's the twin who not only flees from the cross, but then refuses to believe in the resurrection and needs proof. Yeah, he's your twin and he's my twin. We're the same. And we struggle. And as much proof as we have, we would like a little bit more proof. If we could just have a little bit more proof, that would be very helpful. Because it's pretty hard to believe that this is actually how things function. It's pretty hard to believe that love is actually victorious, that love is actually invincible, that love, in fact, never dies, and that if you live a way of love rather than a way of power and domination and control, that love will persevere beyond the power and domination and control. So the apostles didn't believe that yet. Not surprising to me.
When you say it like that, it is one of these things where, they didn't live it yet. They didn't know what this was going to be. And, not to spin this into myself, but I'm having this trouble now of, trying to explain to Jesus that he died, but Jesus is still with you. So I've started using the terminology, this is when Jesus walked with the apostles and was with the apostles. And on Good Friday is when he died, but he is still with you always. But the point is they didn't know all that. And your comment there about love will help all, and love will be victorious, and love will heal. Yes, that is something that I think that we all can hear and appreciate, but there's still this human element that goes, well, that's great, but it's not going to pay the bills. I still got a mortgage that's going to be due here, and I just got fired. What does me, having love, that's not going to, the bank ain't going to cash that, type thing. And there is a reality element of that. And I want to, yes, that's obviously a person viewing, but I wanted to kind of hit upon another spot where I think love might be the only explanation, because I have obviously read the Passion many times, and at the Last Supper, at least my interpretation of reading it, is they're all sitting there and eating, and that's when he calls Judas out. Everyone hears it. Everyone sees it. Now, there might be a little bit of question of, wait a minute, is he talking about me? Is he talking about me? And that's when Peter, gets told he's going to deny him, etc. But Jesus makes it pretty clear, I'm talking about you, Judas. And still, at the end of the day, the other 11 just let him walk away. Yeah, it says he snuck out, and that could have been when they were transitioning from the table to the garden, and, there's movements, there's a way to escape. But still, at one point, one of the 11's like, he just called us out and he ain't here. What's going on here? And then obviously there are times in the gospel that it doesn't write out like a narrative where we don't get every piece of dialogue in detail. But in that moment, there is some form of a reaction of, he's not here and he just got called out by Jesus. What should we do? And that type of conversation or something like that would have had, at least one of them had the extra personal relationship of going off 2 and 2 with him to know a little bit more about his ways on a deeper level than just as the group. But that was always something that I've wondered about, looking at the passion and recognizing that I get Jesus is praying. We all know what Jesus does. What's the other 11 doing, knowing he's not there?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I always love the very realistic objections that you bring forward, Joe, and I always affirm you for that. You're the careful and the believing and yet, properly kind of critical approach that you take to the scriptures, and like, what's that about? How does that make sense? How does that work? So, I have not studied all four gospels have the Last Supper discourse, or have the Last Supper in different ways. The synoptic gospels in a particular way with the words of institution, take this all of you and eat of it, for this is my body. And then John's gospel has its own kind of narrative. Many scholars would say that John presumes the synoptics, like you've already read the synoptic gospels and he's kind of adding to them. He wrote his significantly a couple decades later. In any event, all of them mention Jesus commenting on a betrayer and then in some way exposing a betrayer. The one who dips the morsel in the cup with me is the one who will betray me. And I only say this with some confidence because I was reading Pope Benedict's account from Jesus of Nazareth during Holy Week, and he makes a comment about how it's possible Jesus said that quietly enough that only John could hear him. John is the one who is laying in the bosom of Jesus, which is interesting for us to picture. But if you're reclining at table, you're actually on the floor, like resting on an elbow with a pillow under you, and then it's sort of overlapping. So Jesus's head would be in the breast of whatever, Peter, for example, and then John's head would be somewhere, around the breast of Jesus. And so Jesus could have very well said that in a way that only John heard him, and then was able to incorporate that into the narrative later. And the others also, having post-resurrection conversations, incorporate that into the narrative in their own way. Again, I didn't study all of the points exactly to see all the nuances as it's mentioned in different ways in different gospels, but the most obvious finger pointing to Judas, in other words, from Jesus, may not have been heard by all of them, because when he leaves and Jesus says, what you're going to do it quickly, they thought that he was going to give a donation to the poor because he kept the money bag, and that was a practice of the Passover, that you would go out into the street and give to the poor as an expression of God's compassion or whatever. It was a cultural practice, at least. So it's not clear that they understood who was betraying him. John certainly did. Or John most likely did. I mean, he would have been the one who would get it. And who knows why he didn't do more, and Judas was already out, and what was he going to do? And then I would say, more generally than that, I mean, like, there's so much overwhelming stuff going on that evening. Like, the apostles have no context for this. Like, they've been to the Passover every year of their lives. It never looked like this before. Jesus has incorporated new words into it. They've just watched him raise someone from the dead like 2 days before. They are just overwhelmed with how much, they've really come to believe at some level that he's God. He's certainly the Messiah. Like, he's just blown out all of their categories. And so falling back on normal behavior as a standard is just like a bit much to ask, I think. I'm just willing to give them a pass around so many things. So again, I think your question is absolutely on point and is the right question to ask. And I would just say, there's like all of that is just so overwhelming, confusing, no bearings. They're probably pretty given over to Jesus at that point, like just letting themselves be led by him and not asserting themselves so much about, you know, I mean, they're making these promises to him in the Last Supper discourse, like, we will go and die with you. I'll never leave you, master. I mean, there's this like adherence to him, which is just absolute in these moments. And so I, I think there's, just a lot of kind of fervor and affection and not a lot of critical thinking going on, or like problem solving, planning, and other things that might be normal in a different setting, when they would have been more sort of in themselves.
Well, I actually think that is normal. And on a side note, the reason I ask these questions is because I think you get a deeper understanding of what's going on. Is because human nature
100%.
didn't really change. I mean, there's a very strong argument that they have the exact same human nature that we have. It's just in different context. And one of the things that people see, I mean, sorry, it's the other side of the spectrum, but you ask someone what happened in a car crash, they can't tell you. And there was no bill of fare came out of nowhere. And when you put the context of just the last week preceding this, they got kicked out of the town because they were going to get murdered. So they ran away, effectively. His best friend died. His best friend, who's not one of the 12, dies. The mourning sisters accuse you of being scared and running away, and then he brings that guy back from the dead. And now we come back to town and they're throwing a parade for us. Like, that just sequence of pretty much 7 days is crazy. We kind of just stole a horse, and now we're going to have dinner in possibly the nicest place we've ever been. So I can certainly see the I don't fully get what's going on vibe when you look at it from that context. And anyone who's gone through a significant, I guess the word we use now is traumatic causing event, whether it be positive or negative, because that can be a thing where your mind just gets overwhelmed and you can't really sense what's going on in the moment. We all experience that now in different ways. Some people prolong, some people, right when you get T-boned by a truck. But we all have experienced in some capacity or another. And I think that is a very real answer there is that might have been the only normal thing. He just told them to go out and give money to the poor like everybody else, because Jesus is doing a different prayer than we're used to. And I'm sure it's like anyone else. We've all had a stumbling saying our prayers here and there before. And it's like, oh, he said that different. What's going on here? So you pay attention a little bit extra to that, but you only have so much brain capacity. You spend a little time there, there's going to be a let back a little bit later on, which rattling through this makes even more sense why they weren't able to stay awake 4 hours later. Because the body's going to just need to decompress. And to me, that kind of adds all up perfectly. As guys, I apologize. We took this one a little bit longer than 20 minutes, but we will be with you guys again here next week. We certainly thank you for being with us and helping this growing like crazy. So please keep continuing to click the share button, the subscribe, and we also appreciate everyone who's watching us on YouTube, even though you're just seeing the great logo of the ad. But you can certainly leave comments and communicate us through the YouTube channel. It's one of the easiest ways to go about it. And we will be with you again next week.